Welcome to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. This is Brother André Marie coming to you from St. Benedict's Center in Richmond, New Hampshire. Our websites are catholicism.org and reconquest.net. My email address is bam@catholicism.org. I can also be found easily on Twitter at brother_André and on Facebook. The topic this evening is a fifth column in the Catholic Church. And my guest is Joe Doyle, the Executive Director of the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts. Before we get to the subject matter in the interview with Joe Doyle, I just want to reiterate the standing offer that we've got for a free Blessed Rosary and Rosary pamphlet that was written and printed up by our sisters. We spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. It's a standing offer. Anyone listening to this show, Catholic or non-Catholic, who would like a free Blessed Rosary with a Rosary pamphlet on how to say the Rosary and instructions on the meditations and all, please send me an email with your physical address in it. My address again is bam@catholicism.org. We've given away many of these so far, so we're happy to keep doing it to get people interested in praying the Rosary. And if you listen to this show tonight, if you listen to this episode, you might have more of a reason to pray the Rosary than you thought, because we're talking about a fifth column in the Catholic Church, and people who are working hard to subvert Catholic social order. And so without any further ado, I'm going to go to my guest. Good evening, Joe. Thanks for joining me.
As always, brother, I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you very much. Joe, thanks to Julian Assange and his WikiLeaks organization, we have a little bit of information on, as they say, how the sausage gets made. And the sausage makers in this particular instance being John Podesta, who's a Clinton campaign chairman, the Clinton campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential bid. And he's also the former counselor to President Obama. His emails coming from and to Mr. Podesta showed some back and forth with individuals about how they can institute a Catholic spring. They also showed how much they really detest Catholics, real Catholics, and Catholic thinking on politics and society and so forth, and moral issues. But I'm going to read, in order to set the pace, a little bit from an email exchange with the subject heading, "Opening for a Catholic Spring? Just musing." This is an email exchange between Sandy Newman and John Podesta. Sandy Newman is the president of Voices for Progress. And she herself is a Jew who's never been baptized. She's not a Catholic. She's sort of musing about how to revolutionize Catholic thinking. She says this to Podesta: "This whole controversy with the bishops opposing contraceptive coverage, even though 98% of Catholic women and their conjugal partners have used contraception, has me thinking there needs to be a Catholic spring in which Catholics themselves demand the end of a Middle Ages dictatorship and the beginning of a little democracy and respect for gender equality in the Catholic Church. Is contraceptive coverage an issue around which that could happen? The bishops will undoubtedly continue the fight. Does the Catholic Hospital Association support the administration's new policy, together with the 98%, create an opportunity?" And to this, now she's got more in the email, but to this, Podesta replies, "We created Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good to organize for a movement like this, a moment like this. But I think it lacks the leadership to do so now. Likewise, Catholics United. Like most spring movements, I think this one will have to be bottom up. I'll discuss with Tara. Kathleen Kennedy Townsend is the other person to consult." Of course, the Kathleen Kennedy Townsend mentioned here is a member of the Kennedy political tribe from here in New England, and she's the daughter of Robert Kennedy, I believe. And so that's enough of this exchange. There's one more back and forth from from Sandy Newman, but that gives us the flavor. So here we have two progressivist, pro-abortion ideologues plotting, discussing how it is they can manipulate Catholic opinion on the subject of abortion and birth control and things like that. So, Joe, is this something of a conspiracy, or is this too open to be a conspiracy?
Well, they really don't seem to be concealing it very well if it is a conspiracy. I mean, this is really a classic textbook example, again, of fifth column activity, of a quisling organization, of a subversive organization. Their purposes here, first of all, are overtly political, which is to elect, far left-wing, pro-abortion Democrats to public office, but they also wish to essentially subvert Catholic moral teaching, to create divisions within the Catholic community, and to really discredit the pro-life movement, which has been such a thorn in their side. So this is really something that we've seen before. It's a tawdry tactic. They plan to attack the Catholic Church, but by presenting themselves as Catholics themselves, they're trying to misdirect people and to immunize themselves from the charge of anti-Catholic bigotry.
So John Podesta says we created Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good. So this is
and Catholics United.
Mm-hmm. And these organizations are sort of set up as a fifth column in the church, or at least among people who call themselves Catholic, in order to oppose Catholic teaching, while at the same time professing to be Catholic. And they are not. I mean, these are not grassroots organizations, really, are they? These are funded by elites, right? I mean, doesn't?
Well, they're funded. By the way, just a point about Kathleen Kennedy Townsend. By the way, is the former pro-abortion lieutenant governor of Maryland. Mm-hmm. So you have again another member of the Kennedy family who supports who supports abortion, who supports population control, who supports everything that the Catholic religion is opposed to. These groups are funded largely by the Jewish-Hungarian billionaire George Soros and his Open Society Institute, and of course who goes around the world funding left-wing movements, funding population control, funding the homosexual agenda, funding abortion. And in the case of Catholics United, they're also supported heavily by the Gill Foundation, which has been established by Tim Gill, who is a prominent homosexual activist, LGBT so-called activist, who funds the promotion of homosexuality, the normalization of homosexual behavior, and so-called same-gender marriage. So the agenda of these groups, beyond the overtly partisan political agenda of electing left-wing Democrats, is of course to promote two of the sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance: the willful murder of the innocent, abortion, and the sin of impurity against nature, sodomy. So these groups are profoundly anti-Catholic, and again keep up this fraudulent pretense of being Catholic as a way to disguise their anti-Catholic intentions.
Now, I thought it was interesting. You mentioned that George Soros funds these organizations, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Catholics United. George Soros, of course, is filthy rich. He's a multi-billionaire, and he funds all kinds of evil, leftist, progressivist kind of organizations that are pro-abortion, pro-open borders, pro all sorts of things that we call things that are associated with the far left of the political spectrum, much of which is, of course, vitriolically anti-Christian and completely immoral, completely contrary to the natural law as well. When Podesta talks about a bottoms-up organization, this is fakery, isn't it? I mean, this can't be legit.
Well, it's also the futility of it. All of these organizations are letterheads that are heavily funded and that are controlled by elites. Remember, one of the most infamous groups is, of course, Catholics for Choice, formerly Catholics for Free Choice. And I had a radio debate many years ago with Frances Kissling, who was the executive director, the president of the executive director of it, and she admitted on the air that they had no members. They actually had no members at all. It was an office that was and a staff that was funded, and again, and they were heavily funded by the abortion industry and by the contraceptive industry, and by the way, by Hugh Hefner's Playboy Foundation, among other things. So these groups are all.
And she denied being funded by the contraceptive industry, but you wrote an article on this, and it's going to be linked from the Reconquest.net page for this show. You wrote an article where you called her out on it, and you found the source of her funding, and you could tell her exactly how much she got from a corporation that was they made some sort of a spermicidal foam or something, some kind of contraceptive foam.
EMCO contraceptive foam, yeah, and this was a major source of her funding. So these groups are just front groups, and they're really just they resemble these kind of Communist Party front groups that were set up during the Cold War by the Soviet Union, and it's the same tactic. It's to create these subversive organizations that to misdirect and mislead and divide their opponents, and to promote their agenda while concealing their true purposes, which of course again is all of these groups, Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Catholics United and Catholic Democrats and others want legal, unrestricted, and publicly funded abortion. They want the complete implementation of the homosexual agenda, including same gender so-called marriage. They want population control. They want government and private employer funding, and even church funding, institutional funding of contraceptive coverage. They want again everything that is opposed to divine and natural law, and again that they carry on the pretense of being Catholic so as to avoid the stigma of anti-Catholicism, which is precisely what they're engaged in.
Now, Joe, just to back up a little bit in these, getting back to the WikiLeaks revelations. Not exactly along the same lines as this, not the same content, not the same particular emails, but other emails revealed various techniques that were kept by that were used by the Clinton campaign in their efforts to win the presidency for their candidate. And these folks discussed how they would plant certain people, some of whom were extremely unstable, unsavory characters, very obnoxious characters, at Trump rallies to do all kinds of zany things to try to detract attention from Trump and this and that. And while I'm certainly not in a position to endorse a candidate, and that's not what I have in mind here at all, you're seeing from these very same people how it is that they manipulate reality. They hire agents to go in and do extreme things to make the other candidate look bad or something like that, and do all of this chicanery, and then the claim is that this was somebody who was representing Trump or some Trump supporter who's really insane, and then they can point to him and say, see what these people are like.
Well, again, these people really are cultural Marxists, and they're taking a page out of the Marxist book of tactics, which is to have agents, provocateurs go in and create disruption and create disorder, and then discredit the institution that is in fact the victim of this planned infiltration. One of the ways that the Soviets took over in Eastern Europe in the late 1940s was that they would foment riots and strikes and demonstrations and all sorts of insurrection and disorders in the streets of Eastern European capitals, and then they'd insist they were just sending Russian troops in to restore order and to rescue these people from the forces of anarchy. The forces of anarchy, of course, which were the Soviets had set into motion. Mm-hmm. So again, this is very, very typical. It's not original. It's a very long-standing tactic used by cultural Marxists, used by communists to destabilize countries and institutions which they target for destruction.
So again, when we're talking about George Soros funding these organizations, that means that these folks are bankrolled by a filthy rich man who's an ideologue, who's committedly opposed to Catholic moral teaching on all these issues, including infanticide. And he's going to be he's funding these people who set up these fake organizations, and in order to manipulate the appearance as if this is a Catholic grassroots organization of faithful Catholics who want to be change agents in the church, but meanwhile the change agents are complete outsiders. This is not Catholic source money. It's coming from the Playboy Foundation or Soros or organizations like this, which have some sort, or the contraceptive companies or the abortion industry, Planned Parenthood company. They're doing
Gill again, the Gill Foundation again, a huge homosexual activist. Yeah, it's very clearly these people are quislings. These people are literally fifth columnists. Their loyalty is not to the Catholic faith. It's not to the Catholic community. It's not to the Catholic Church. Their loyalty are to their paymasters like Soros and Gill and others. And of course, their loyalty is to the Hillary campaign and to the Democratic Party. And their purpose again is to misdirect. It's to destabilize. It's to divide and conquer, divide et impera. It is to subvert and it's to confuse Catholics. You know, they're the architects of confusion here, and their goal is to create controversy and disorder inside the Catholic community, and to carry out this attack on the Church, on divine and natural law, on Catholic moral teaching, and on the constitutional rights of Catholics in the case of this Obama contraceptive mandate, while again concealing their anti-Catholic agenda by pretending to be Catholics themselves. They're traitors, the people involved in this, and they're not Catholics. They're enemies of the faith. They're enemies of the Catholic community, and they're misappropriating the Catholic name to conceal their agenda.
And you exposed Frances Kissling quite well in the article that you wrote on her, which is called, again, that article is called Agent of Influence, and I'll have a link to it from Reconquest.net. But Frances Kissling is admittedly not a Catholic in any meaningful sense of the term. She doesn't believe that Jesus Christ was God. She doesn't believe that she doesn't go to confession. She doesn't go to Sunday Mass. She doesn't have any of the earmarks of what constitutes a Catholic, except for baptism, which she can't take away. She doesn't have. So
yeah, she actually said she doesn't pray.
Yeah, she never prays the rosary.
How do you,
Yeah.
How do you claim to be a Catholic? She said she re-entered the church. She left the church and re-entered it as a change agent. And, of course, she was the head. She's retired now from Catholics for Free Choice, now Catholics for Choice. But she was the head of the National Abortion Federation, which was the trade association of the abortion industry. That is to say, an organization, an association of actual abortionists. Owners of abortion clinics.
And she owned two abortion clinics, one in Pelham and one in Manhattan, I think, right?
Right, and she also helped set up illegal abortion clinics in Mexico. So this person, again, was funded by the contraceptive industry, was funded by Hugh Hefner, was funded by all the various enemies of the faith, and their purpose, again, was to get into the media. And, of course, organizations like the New York Times and the Boston Globe treated this organization seriously and didn't expose its true origins and its true purposes. And it gave the impression there was a large number of Catholics that were opposed to church teaching about contraception and about abortion. And I think, by the way, it's an interesting comment that even in the kind of current debilitated state of American Catholicism, where so many Catholics, including our leadership, seems to have conformed to the culture. The left is still concerned over the fact that there is still grassroots Catholic militancy on the life issue, and they've still seen in the pro-life movement, Catholics determined to stop the slaughter of the innocent, and this, of course, is something that alarms them and concerns them. And one of the purposes purposes of these groups is specifically to discredit the pro-life movement by constantly trying to make it out to be an arm of the Republican Party, and by suggesting every time a pro-life spokesman or even a bishop or a priest speaks out about moral issues, that's really code language for vote Republican.
Joe, we have to go to break, so let's hold that thought there. You're listening to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. Radio the way it should be.
You're listening to Reconquest with Brother André Marie, seeking that which was lost and fighting for it. Exclusively on the Veritas Radio Network's Crusade.
Welcome back to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. This is Brother André Marie coming to you from St. Benedict Center in Richmond, New Hampshire. Our websites are Catholicism.org and Reconquest.net. I can be emailed at bam@Catholicism.org, and you can find me easily on Twitter at Brother_Andre, and I'm also on Facebook. Just look for Brother André Marie. Our guest this evening is Joe Doyle, the Executive Director of the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts, and we're continuing to talk about a fifth column in the Catholic Church. Joe, when we left off, and by the way, I'm sounding hesitant. I'm sounding alternately hesitant and hurried tonight because my sound engineer, Brother Joseph Mary, is not here right now, and I'm a one-man show, and I'm technically challenged, so I keep making little boo-boos that are stressing me out.
It's just you and the Holy Ghost, then, brother.
Yes, and the Holy Ghost apparently wants me to learn something about humility, which he tends to do, and I'm kind of slow. So, anyway, Joe, you were saying how one of the tactics of these organizations, like Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good, like Catholics United, like all of these other Quisling organizations, as you call them, Catholic Democrats, etc., these folks have as one of their techniques to frame it, to frame the discourse in such a way that if you're going to attack them, or if you're going to defend Catholic truth in some matter about, say, government-funded contraception, or forcing Catholics to pay for contraception or to ensure contraception, or abortion, or any of these other hot-button issues, if you're going to toe the Catholic line on any of these issues, that's code talk for saying vote Republican, and that you're becoming partisan.
Exactly, and of course the hypocrisy here is so thick you can cut it with the knife. They're the partisans. They're openly and unreservedly connected to the left wing of the Democratic Party. They support President Obama. They support Hillary Clinton. They support all of these pro-abortion Democrats in Congress. And they're essentially accusing they'd like to accuse the pro-life movement, or any bishop or any priest or any Catholic spokesman who speaks out on moral issues of being a partisan. And of course, it's also a bit more sinister than that, because one of the ways they want to silence and intimidate the church is by threatening its tax exemption. And so they always claim, whenever somebody on the Catholic side speaks out, say, against the moral law, speaks out in favor of the moral law, against against one of these sins that cry out to heaven for vengeance, like the willful murder of the innocent, they're saying this is this moral
you have a chat message from Brother
is
David.
In fact a political intervention, and the church should lose its tax-exempt status as a result of this. So again, they're working against the faith. They're trying to silence and intimidate Catholic voices, and of course, as I said, they really fear and they really loathe and they're really alarmed by the pro-life movement, because they see, even in the current weakened state of American Catholicism, they still see this grassroots militancy on behalf of Catholics in defense of human life, and this is a very grave source of concern for them. So again, they try to taint the pro-life movement and discredit it and suggest that it's just a partisan front for the Republican Party. In fact, that any attempt to speak out is on any Catholic moral issue is in fact a partisan. It's code language for vote Republican. And the church should lose its tax exemption as a result of this. They're really, really quite malign.
So this is what you call this is what we call a lie, right?
Yeah,
I mean, this is just a lie.
They're malign and they're mendacious, and they're determined to silence the authentic voice of Catholic morality. in order to advance their agenda. And again, this is really a very old tactic. And again, these people are effectively cultural Marxists. I think we've talked before about this is precisely the things that the communists did in Eastern Europe. They created the Pacem in Terris organization, the peace priests in Czechoslovakia. They also created a so-called peace priest movement in Hungary, and of course
didn't those movements evolve into the organization called Pax Christi?
It may well have been. A lot of these groups have links to Pax Christi, and of course to other dissident Catholic groups. But I mean, these, in the case of Pacem in Terris, this was actually a government-sponsored entity in Czechoslovakia, sponsored by the Gottwald regime, which was the Quisling communist-imposed government that took over in the coup of 1948. And of course, then you had the Patriotic Catholic Association, which was established in China in 1957, and then condemned by Pope Pius XII in 1958, and I think it was in Apostolorum Principis, his encyclical. So these were government attempts to subvert the Catholic Church, and the method in the case of Eastern Europe was three-pronged. One was an open repression of the Catholic Church, the suppression of the closing of Catholic newspapers, the closing of Catholic schools, the seizure of church property, the arrest of priests and bishops. And a second method was the complete suppression of Eastern or Uniate Catholicism by forcing them into a union with the schismatic Eastern Orthodox. But the third method was again the creation of these Quisling organizations of basically paid and bought off priests that would speak out against the United States and in favor of Stalin, in favor of the Soviet Union, and in favor of the communist government, a communist government which was openly persecuting the Church. So none of these tactics that we see with Catholics United or Catholic Democrats or Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good or Catholics for Choice, none of them are original. Again, it's an old Marxist tactic, and it precedes Marxism. We recall during the French Revolution, they established the so-called Constitutional Church. And Talleyrand was the Catholic Bishop of Autun was the bishop that consecrated the schismatic members of the so-called Constitutional Church, which didn't last very long because when the revolution went to its more extreme period with the Reign of Terror in 1793, the Quisling Constitutional bishops and prelates and priests were executed along with the faithful Catholic priests and prelates. So this is again a long-standing tactic of the enemies of the Church to divide it, and of course, to some extent, it speaks also to the resilience and the independence of the Church. If you look at again the Eastern Orthodox churches, if you look at the kind of more hierarchical Protestant churches like the Anglicans and the Lutherans, you simply had a case where the state stepped in and took control of them effectively, but they couldn't do that with the Catholic Church because of the Holy See and because of the unity centered around the successor to St. Peter. Mm-hmm. So they had to, if they couldn't overtly control it, they had to subvert it from within by creating again these fifth column organizations.
And all Orthodox churches are basically national in nature: Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox. And they're cut along national lines, and nationalism forms sort of part of their identity. So that's easy to do there. In Protestant sects, much of the same can be said of them in their origins. I mean, in the Germanies, things went along state lines. It was in the ruling class was pro-Protestant and formed Protestant factions. These weren't grassroots.
In Scandinavia, you had the state churches, under the crown, and of course in Britain, of course, you had three state churches. You had the Church of England, which included Wales, and then you had the Anglican Church of Ireland, which was disestablished in the 19th century, and then you still have today the Church of Scotland, which is not Anglican but Presbyterian, which is the established religion in Scotland. By the way, the Queen is a member of two different religions. In the south of the border, she's a member of the Church of England. She's an Anglican, and north of the border, she's a Presbyterian.
And as I understand, she's a very low church Anglican, so that's actually sort of consistent.
Yes.
If you can call heresy consistent.
And when the royal family wants a divorce, they go to Scotland because the divorce is more more lenient there. Anyways,
I see.
But so this is an old tactic that even precedes Marxism to create these dissonant organizations within the Catholic Church. And because we see them, we have Catholic Democrats, is run by a fellow named Steve Kruger, a complete fraud as a Roman Catholic.
Joe, let's slow down a little bit and talk about some of these particular organizations. So we've already named, just to sort of do a little check off here, we've already named Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Catholics United, both of which you said are Soros funded, and that's easily provable. This isn't just some wild accusation.
And in the case of Catholics United, funded by Tim Gill, the homosexual activist.
Mm-hmm. We talked about Francis Kissling, who was involved in Catholics for Free Choice, which is now called Catholics for Choice. And you just named another organization. Was it Catholic Democrats? Was that it?
Catholic Democrats, who also had a subsidiary called Catholics for Obama, and this is run by a guy named Steve Kruger. And he was involved in Voice of the Faithful, and I debated him on Boston television years ago on New England Cable News, and I kept asking him if he would tell us where he and his organization stand on the right to life and on Catholic moral law, and he kept refusing to answer, saying those aren't the issues. And I suggested that he was a complete fraud as a Roman Catholic, and he took offense at that. And and my response was, well, he shouldn't take offense because he is a fraud, So it was. This is a case of. By the way, the Code of Canon Law not only prohibits schism and apostasy and heresy. It also speaks to the issue of what they call incredulity, which is a refusal to affirm the Catholic faith and a refusal to affirm Catholic teaching. And this fellow Kruger clearly refused to affirm Catholic teaching. And now with Catholic Democrats, of course, they openly support Roe versus Wade, and they oppose the overturning of Roe versus Wade, and they support keeping, 1.25 million children have died through surgical abortion alone. God knows how many, perhaps many multiples of that through chemical abortion, through abortifacient contraceptives.
Okay, Joe, you're saying they're supporting Roe v. Wade, but they say that they're pro-life.
Well, Catholic Democrats say they're pro-life, but they claim, you see, that we can't overturn Roe versus Wade. So the real way to be pro-life is to create a socialist society and have more social welfare spending and expand the size of government, and this will reduce the number of abortions. Say if you can reduce unemployment and if you can reduce other things, then people will have fewer incentives to have an abortion.
Sort of like in Soviet Russia.
Yes, and it's also, of course, very similar to Cardinal Bernardine and Father Brian Hare's seamless garment argument, where the pro-life position is essentially trivialized. Everything becomes pro-life. If you're for public housing, you're pro-life. If you're for government subsidized health care, you're for pro-life. Bill Cotter, who runs Operation Rescue in Boston, and I attended a seminar a few years ago at Assumption College in Massachusetts, where Victoria Kennedy, the widow of Senator Edward Kennedy, spoke, and she's also a board member, by the way, of Catholic Democrats. And she said, well, after all, we're all pro-life, aren't we really? And I said, no, of course we're not. These people support mass murder. They support the continued, 57 million surgical abortions isn't enough. They want the killing to continue.
So this is just a species of nominalism. I mean, they're using the word, but they're draining it of all meaning.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make that point just so that the listeners understand. If you go to the website of Catholic Democrats, they're not going to say we're viciously pro-abortion. They're not going to say we want women to have their babies sucked out of their wombs. They're not going to say anything like that. They're very slick in the presentation, and they make it sound like they're really pro-life there. After all, they're Catholic. We're Catholic. Of course we're pro-life. But they're completely redefining what that means. And it's really revolutionary, and it's very undermining of logos. It's very undermining of reason, of rationality, as well as of the Catholic religion, because they're redefining what these words mean, and they're saying that as long as you can have a consistent life ethic, as long as we can create a perfect society where nobody ever really needs an abortion, that's how we're pro-life. We're going to be authentically pro-life by creating a society where all this justice and perfection, like their socialist utopia. Once we create that, nobody will even think about an abortion because everything will be so perfect.
Well,
and of course, that doesn't exist. That's impossible.
Well, yeah, the theory seems to be maybe if we had a full employment economy, we wouldn't need laws against bank robbing either, you know?
Yeah.
And this is something that, it's completely irrational and illogical. When people engage in evil, they lie. And, what does the gospel tell us about the devil? He's a liar and a murderer and the father of lies. And, Scripture is telling us that there's an intrinsic connection between murder and lies. And these people support murder, and therefore they lie about it. Mm-hmm. And this is, of course, something that, again, misleads people. It's designed to misdirect people. They're not honest. They're not forthright. It also speaks to the kind of futility of any kind of dialogue with these people. You can't have a dialogue with people who are intellectually dishonest. They refuse to tell the truth. They refuse to openly admit many of their positions. They clearly they support abortion that will be legal and unrestricted and publicly funded right up to the moment of birth. They support the Obama opposed and these groups opposed born alive legislation, which would actually preserve the life of a child that was. That survived a botched abortion.
So Catholic Democrats who claim to be faithfully Catholic and claim to be pro-life, they are against born alive legislation.
Well, I mean, their hero is Obama, mm-hmm. and one of their subsidiary organizations is Catholics for Obama, and Obama is opposed to born alive legislation.
Mm-hmm. Now they have you. Speaking of Quislings and so forth, you talked about, you and I have talked in the past, never on air or anything, about Crux, this spin-off, I think, of the Boston Globe that hired John Allen, who's a liberal progressivist with a collar of journalistic respectability. Basically, to tell us about Crux. I mean, does that fit into this spectrum of fake quizzing organizations?
It's very troublesome. It isn't quite as bad as it was before, but it's still very problematic. Crux was the marriage of America's most anti-Catholic newspaper, the Boston Globe, which has waged a 40-year war against Catholicism, against the constitutional rights of Catholics, against the Catholic community, and against any political figure in Massachusetts that had the temerity to defend Catholic moral teaching or the rights of the Catholic community. And it was the marriage of the Boston Globe and Marjorie Egan, former columnist for the Boston Herald, who was probably one of the most vicious and mendacious and really vile anti-Catholic bigots in the American media, who spent more than 24 years at the Boston Herald, writing the most deceitful and the most malevolent things imaginable about the Catholic Church. Egan, in 2006, by the way, wrote about Pope Benedict, Pope Benedict, and said that he ought to resign and give himself up for prosecution, suggesting that he was involved in some kind of cover-up of child molestation. So this was Crux. And, astonishingly and unfathomably, and I think quite unconscionably, the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston, Sean Cardinal O'Malley, attended the opening ceremonies for Crux when it was first established. And again, this is, and even joked about having Marjorie Egan write for the pilot. So again, the level of just subservience here to secular elites is just extraordinary. Anyways, Crux did not prove to be. It was run by the Boston Globe, and they brought in John Allen, who supposedly has this reputation as a professional journalist, but had worked for the National Catholic Reporter, which was, of course, again violently pro-abortion. Crux did not prove to be economically viable for the Globe. And after a little over a year and a half, they essentially stopped their subsidy. But guess who picked up the subsidy? Carl Anderson, the Knights of Columbus. The
Knights of Columbus. It's right on their webpage. Knights of Columbus. Under Friends of Crux, the first thing is Knights of Columbus, then DeSales Media Group, then Catholic Voices.
Now, Teresa Hannafin, who was the Globe functionary, who was the editor, is gone, and Marjorie Egan is gone, but Alan is still there. And Egan used to, on the pages of Crux, celebrate the use of state power against the church, against these court cases where people are suing the church because they wouldn't hire or somebody who was a civilly married, quote unquote, homosexual, or one of these cases. But now she's gone. But they now have a fellow named Charles Camosi, who is a member of an organization called the Democrats for Life, which sounds good again, but he's brought in a whole series of people who, again, are being brought in to essentially attack the pro-life movement. And they brought... He did an interview with this, I think, Kristen Day, who is, the executive director of Democrats for Life, and she talked about how much all the hate that's in the pro-life movement, again, playing right into the hands of the caricatures that the left makes of pro-lifers as violent and hateful people who are harassing women in front of abortion clinics. And then
in order to keep the narrative going about how hateful and wicked and anti-woman and all that the pro-life movement is, they basically created a controlled opposition organization. Was that?
Yeah, essentially, and this is not Catholic Democrats now. This is Democrats for Life, which has historically been a bit a bit better on the pro-life issue. But now it seems to be its purpose seems to be attack the mainstream pro-life movement. And just recently they had yet another column where they talked about how pro-lifers need to, quote unquote, lay off God and stop referencing the Almighty, stop referencing Almighty God, and that way you'll appeal to people to secular society better. So, of course, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Mm-hmm. So Crux is still very, very problematic, and again, it's being funded by the Knights of Columbus, America's largest Catholic organization. Carl Anderson, as you may recall, recently suggested that Catholic politicians like Tim Kaine, who support legal abortion, ought to imitate the suggestion that John F. Kennedy made during his Houston speech in 1960, that if there was a conflict between their religious beliefs and their public duties, that they ought to resign. Well, of course, no one is going to resign. That's just complete political posturing by Anderson's part. But one thing that he could do to help the pro-life movement is simply defund Crux. It's extraordinary that a liberal Catholic website that is maligning the pro-life movement is being funded by again the largest Catholic organization in the country, an organization which claims to be in the front lines, quote unquote, of the pro-life struggle.
And he could defund Crux, and he could also kick out pro-abortion Knights of Columbus, of which there are many, not just pro-abortion privately, but publicly pro-abortion Knights of Columbus who are politicians and so forth.
Well, we just the Catholic Action League just last year did in 2015, after all the stories broke about Planned Parenthood dismembering children and selling their body parts, did an analysis of the Massachusetts legislature about how many members of Catholics in the legislature were listed as either allies or as friends, supporters of Planned Parenthood, and a majority of the members of the Knights of Columbus in the legislature were supporters of Planned Parenthood.
Joe, we're gonna. I tell you what, we're gonna go to a break now, and when we come back for the third and final short segment, we'll pick up on that. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're listening to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. Radio the way it should be.
Your guide to the reconquest of what modern man has lost. Think of it as a roadmap to truth with a crucifix as a compass. Reconquest is exclusively on the Veritas Radio Network's Crusade.
Welcome back to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. This is Brother André Marie coming to you from St. Benedict Center in Richmond, New Hampshire. Our websites are Catholicism.org and Reconquest.net. My email address is bam@Catholicism.org. And you can find me on Twitter at brother_André, and I'm easily found also on Facebook. We're in the final segment here talking to our friend Joe Doyle, the executive director of the Massachusetts Catholic Action League, or the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts. We're talking about a fifth column in the church. And Joe, when we left off, One question that came to my mind was how actually effective are these organizations? We know that large numbers of Catholics are very confused on these moral issues, like abortion, like especially contraception, and that it's okay to vote for political candidates who completely oppose Christ's teachings, who are completely antithetical to Christian social order and social doctrine and so forth. How effective do you think they are?
I think that's difficult to quantify, but I think you have to draw a distinction here. They understand that large numbers of Catholics, perhaps a majority of Catholics in this country, have effectively conformed to the culture and surrendered to the spirit of the times. But there's a distinction between self-identified Catholics, nominal Catholics, baptized Catholics, if you will, and those who are practicing and believing Catholics. And I think what they're really aiming at here is not merely to gather the disaffected Catholics, but to try to change the opinions and the attitudes of those who are faithful and practicing Catholics. And if Podesta himself suggests in the emails that they haven't been terribly effective, but I think what they're really looking at is they're trying to either pressure or cajole or threaten the bishops themselves and the leaders of the church into backing away from Catholic moral issues, and perhaps even imitating Pope Francis in making these ambiguous statements that can be construed as supportive of their position. So that they haven't been quite successful in that, but God knows how many, as I said, ordinary self-identified Catholics are being misled by them. But they understand there's a faithful remnant, and again, this faithful remnant is most visible in the pro-life community, and this is what they're alarmed at, and this is what they're concerned at, and this is what they're trying to essentially contain. So, time will tell, but most of these groups have not been, you might say, on their own standard successful. As I said, Podesta has suggested that both Catholics in Alliance for the Common Good and Catholics United lack the leadership to create a grassroots revolution. Voice of the Faithful, we know, has been kind of financially imploding recently and has kind of essentially disappeared from the media. And Catholics for Free Choice, I think, is so exposed now as a quisling organization that no one really takes it very seriously outside of the New York Times, the Boston Globe, and the mainstream media as a Catholic group. But again, it was they're concerned about the faithful Catholic remnant. They understand that society at large accepts their ideology, but the very nature of revolutionaries is that despite all the talk about diversity, they can't stand any real pluralism of thought here.
And this is like the homosexual agenda. They don't want tolerance because they're the most viciously intolerant people that you can deal with.
Yeah, I think the instincts here are all totalitarian, and the very fact that there is a group of faithful Catholics in the pro-life movement holding out against the sexual revolution is simply intolerable to them and makes them insecure and makes them feel threatened. So these groups are essentially there to suppress any expression of traditional Catholic moral teaching. But so now, they haven't done that yet, but they've created a great deal of confusion, I think.
Now, Joe, we've got an article on our website on Bella Dodd, who was the communist agent, admittedly communist agent. She reverted back to the faith of her baptism, and admitted all these horrible things that she had done as a communist. But one of the things she did was recruited communist agents to go into Catholic seminaries. So we have, in some of these, and she said towards the end of her life that some of these people had very high positions in the church, bishops and so forth. So some of the infiltrators are just political hacks and political activists. Some of them a little bit more insidious.
Clearly, and again, this was part of the three-pronged communist assault. One which was to take a sledgehammer, a frontal assault on the church, and simply to repress it. But and the other was to try to divide whole chunks of it off by taking the Eastern Catholics away. But the third was this attack, you might say, from the rear. This infiltration, this creation of a fifth column. And again, this has always been the method of the enemies of the church. And we've seen it before, and we will see it again in the future. And I think Catholics need to be alerted to this.
Now, what about the? Do you give any credence to the permanent instruction of the Alta Vendita? where the Italian Carbonari, the Freemasonic secret society in Italy had this plan to infiltrate the church?
Well, I mean, clearly we've seen, infiltration of the church. Even, a very kind of respectable mainstream conservative, the late William F. Buckley, spoke about the fact that Archbishop Bugnini, who was the real author of the Novus Ordo, was discovered to be a Freemason and was bundled off to Iran as the apostolic delegate by Pope Paul VI when the news of this broke. So we've clearly seen, infiltration inside the church. And the enemies of the faith are fear, loathe, and hate the Catholic religion, and are prepared to destroy it in any means possible, including the possibility of sending agents of influence into it. And of course, remember the revelations from the P2 Lodge, the Propaganda Duo Lodge of the Italian Grand Orient Freemasonry years ago, and it had a list of prominent prelates and even cardinals who were members of this Masonic lodge. So we shouldn't be surprised. Mm-hmm. It was Daniel Carroll, one of our Catholic founding fathers, was supposedly the Grand Master of the Masons in Maryland.
And his was it his brother or his cousin? Our first bishop, John Carroll.
It was John and Daniel were brothers, and their first cousin was Charles Carroll of Carrollton, who was the signer of the Declaration.
Okay, so John Carroll, our first bishop, said that the papal condemnations of Freemasonry had no effect in his diocese.
Exactly. Yeah, and his brother was connected with the Masons. So and of course he was also in an American society where Freemasonry was very respectable, and of course desired to be accepted and to be tolerated by that society. So again, we've seen a great deal. Daniel O'Connell, the great liberator of Ireland, was briefly in the Masons, but left apparently when he discovered its true character. But we've certainly seen many. We have, by the way, a couple of Catholic state representatives here in Massachusetts that advertise on their website that they're members of their local Knights of Columbus Council and of their local Masonic Lodge.
Yeah, dual membership, sort of like dual citizenship in the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of Antichrist.
Exactly.
So we have only about 2.5 minutes left here, Joe. When we talk about opposing these people, obviously this is a supernatural thing. This isn't something that's won at the polls necessarily. This isn't something that's going to be won necessarily with political action, although nobody's against political action that doesn't waste one's time. But what would you say is the best way to oppose these folks?
Well, the best way, first of all, in the case of the pro-life movement and the pro-family movement, is to keep on doing what you're doing and not be distracted by them. This is what they're really concerned about. Again, that this faithful remnant are prepared to resist this aggression against human life and against divine and natural law. So, but beyond that, I think we need to expose these people really as, again, the quislings, the traitors, the fifth colonists that they are, and be prepared to understand that these people are not faithful Catholics. If they misappropriate the Catholic name, it's merely as to conceal their anti-Catholic agenda, their desire to their ambition and goal to weaken and ultimately to destroy any kind of Catholic moral influence in our society. And I think it's useful to point out, as we did in the case of Frances Kissling, her background, and I think it's useful to point out about guys like Kruger and about the people who fund these sources. And, people are, I remember years ago when Catholics for Free Choice weren't quite as well known, many people were really, it wasn't so much that got the attention that they were being funded by the makers of Emco contraceptive foam, is that the fact that they're actually being funded by Hugh Hefner and Playboy. I said yes. So it was.
He's a bit more famous.
Yeah. So we have. I think it's very, very important to point out the funding sources because these people, again, they're largely letterhead organizations. They don't have a large grassroots membership. They're creations. They're artificial creations of anti-Catholic elites.
Okay,
so
Joe, we're running out of time here. So I think in summary, you're saying the best thing we can do is to just tear the mask off, like what was said of Freemasonry by one of the popes.
Which is what was it Leo the 13th that said that?
Yeah, tear the mask off. Well, you're listening to Reconquest on the Crusade channel of the Veritas Radio Network. God bless and Mary keep you.